so Ryan with Huckabuy here. I've got Geoff Atkinson, our founder and CEO of Huckabuy. Geoff, how are you doing?
I'm great, Ryan. It's snowing here in Park City.
All right.
Glad to join you on a video session. You've been rocking it, and I volunteered my services if I can help in any way. That's why we're here.
Yeah, for sure, and I appreciate that too. It's not really been a discovery, but we've kind of found a way to leverage video for rankings, and it's pretty exciting. So that's one of the reasons that we're doing this, is obviously for our audience as well. So first of all, let's go through some introductions. Geoff, a little bit about you, kind of your background. First of all, what got you into SEO?
Yeah, so it's kind of a random occurrence. I grew up in the East Coast. I'm from the Boston area, went to school in New Hampshire. I was a ski racer. And so I ended up actually taking a job here in Utah, mainly because I wanted to be a ski bum, but sort of still have a real job. And so I took a really entry-level job at Overstock and started in their email marketing team. Learned email marketing. We grew that, kind of through the roof. Started learning about personalization, started to implement those personalization ideas and technology on our core website. And then literally another vice president at Overstock had met this guy named Paul Bremer, and he had been talking about search engine optimization, and we didn't know anything about it. Like, no one in the company knew about it. I gave him a call, and about an hour and a half later, I was running up to Patrick's office, the founder and CEO of Overstock, and getting on the whiteboard and explaining that, if you could rearrange the way that the site functions and make it easier for Google to understand, we would be getting all this free traffic. And we kind of thought it was too good to be true. And that's how it started. I worked on all sorts of different digital marketing. I managed digital marketing and ended up becoming their SVP over marketing and analytics, and did a ton of sort of revenue facing stuff at Overstock. But SEO is one of those just like crazy wins that, we took it from zero to I think about 300 million in like 4 years. And it was just a crazy growth, and we learned a lot. We had unlimited resources, which is a really rare thing. And so I didn't even anticipate Huckabuy turning into an SEO company, but I can't seem to shake it. So here we are.
I know the feeling, actually. And that kind of goes to a little bit of like my background, because I started out doing local, like the map pack and local SEO. And, there's a couple companies in Utah that I helped start, and kind of moved off on that one. I think I have a affinity for startups until I found the right one. So it was really funny too, because we used to just go in with the map pack, and you could just change the name of a business and keyword stuff the hell out of it, and it would show up on maps right away. In fact, not saying that we're the only ones that did this, but there were a lot of companies out there that would claim like a business listing, optimize it with the person on the phone, and then hold it hostage to get them to actually get them to pay for our service. So it was some pretty shady stuff, but yeah, I mean, that stems all the way back into like 2006. So
one of the things I love about you, and we have great talks, is you're definitely the most experienced SEO person on the Huckabuy team. And we, once in a while things will come up and we'll just have a good laugh. I mean, I remember those being called IYPs, Internet Yellow Pages.
Yep.
Where you basically figure out directories like whitepages.com, yellowpages.com, Yelp, City Search. And if you got all the information to match up, Bing, you'd just jump to number one. There was all sorts of little games to be played. And it seemed like every time that Google spun out something new, whether it was Google Shopping or Maps or, images or whatever, it had a little bit different algorithm. And of course, all the SEOs would figure it out, right away, and sort of take advantage of these new opportunities. And Maps was definitely a big one.
Yeah, it was. Which actually kind of is a nice transition too, because we've kind of talked a little bit about where SEO came from, what it was back in the day. I remember keyword stuffing and ghosting those words within a web page to where you change the words where they're the same color as the background,
Yeah.
and you would rank like no problem. And then Google, yeah, there were a few times where we got penalized for doing some crazy stuff, but
Do
with
you
the
remember early days in search when you'd search for something, even maybe before Google, and it was like Ask Jeeves or some of these other, sites that at the time weren't really using links as an indicator of relevancy.
Yep.
And you'd search for something and you knew that the first result probably wasn't very relevant. And in fact, if you click on it, a lot of these tactics were, it was just the same word over and over and over again on the whole page. Yeah, it's come a long way since then, hasn't it? The whole black hat SEO is sort of a thing of the past, which is a good thing, but was kind of fun while it lasted. It was like the Wild West.
Yeah, it was. I should have worn my black hat shirt. That's yeah, it was crazy, and it was highly competitive. I'm not saying that it's not highly competitive now. I would actually argue that it's more so now.
Yeah.
Especially so recently, and this kind of brings into where Huckabuy comes into play. You picked out that need for something on a technical level, and we're gonna talk about structured data first. Structured data, schema.org, JSON LD, they're all technical terms, and I think that's more of the beginning of like technical SEO and where that really starts to come into play, because schema and structured data, they've been around for a really long time.
Yeah, I think it's like 15 years or so now.
Yep. But it wasn't necessarily adapted and has been so difficult to implement on websites that developers they don't want to touch it. Programmers don't want to touch it. So that kind of brings me to, you saw that need there. And that's where Huckabuy comes into play, correct?
I wish I could take that kind of credit that I had this like brilliant idea that there needed to be a solution for technical SEO. That's where it sort of evolved to, but the original idea of Huckabuy was actually an affiliate site. It was a very spammy SEO affiliate site that think of, and it still does. I think it's a great idea. It's still, maybe someone will listen and try it. The idea was a place where you can do a comparison shopping engine like a Google Shopping, but you also are including coupon codes. And I guess that does kind of exist now. But at the time, it really didn't. And it was a totally SEO play. It was going nowhere. I think the biggest month we ever had in terms of affiliate commissions was like $20. So it was not. But we had built a lot of cool SEO software. In particular, it was Huck News, which is a product we don't even have anymore. Was the product that people wanted to start using. It was this really funky little tool that allowed you to basically grab a URL. Ideally, it's like a Instagram post or some sort of structured format so that it would show up correctly. You'd put it in, it would grab like the first paragraph, and then you'd write a little comment about this Instagram post. And what it did was it created a fresh piece of content on any page that you wanted, and you could do it in 10 minutes, 5 minutes. And that's hard to do, basically giving the page updates, much more frequently than it would be getting previously. And it worked. It actually really drove results. So that was actually our first foray into software, was people wanting to license Huck News. And so,
okay.
And then we put in a bit of a development effort to build the structured data tool, which we were using at the time. We were already doing structured data on Huckabuy.com, which was basically think of it as an e-commerce site. And in fact, you still see sometimes in Search Console and different places, those old URLs are, still pop up, because we did do a pretty good job from an SEO perspective. Traffic was pretty significant. But the structured data piece was a no-brainer. I mean, that was something that, we had these really forward-thinking SEO folks at Overstock, and it started with Paul. And Paul, for people that have been in SEO for a long time, they'll know Paul Bremer. He was one of the original ones. I mean, he goes back 20 years, or maybe more, doing SEO. He got, kind of knew the game really well, and then got hooked on there's a woman named Barbara Starr who was really kind of one of the first people organizing schema.org and figuring out what this sort of structured data movement was going to look like. And I remember her actually coming to Overstock, to our offices, and she presented to us what it was, and in a very kind of academic way. You know, when you have like a very scientific professor and they're not the best at communicating, but you know that they're onto something pretty big.
Yeah.
It was like that. It was a pretty simple concept that took us like 5 hours to understand. And that was the beginning of structured data in terms of my exposure. And we did it at Overstock. It was very successful. And it just made sense, right? Like, this is how Google and other search engines want to receive information. And so to do it in an automated fashion, that's the first product that Huckabuy really sold significantly. I mean, we sold in a very quick pivot, and that we pivoted, and about 9 months later, maybe 12 months later, we were over $1 million in annual recurring revenue off of our structured data product, which was crazy growth.
Okay. And for our audience that's listening or will be listening or seeing this video, structured data is a type of language that you put on your website or a specific page on your website that transmits these tiny little signals to Google. Say, for instance, like you have a product, and the price of that product, the availability of that product, the reviews of that product. Those are all those tiny little signals that structured data is. You can use it in a couple of different languages, but Google interprets that and actually puts that in organic search results. They use that to enhance the organic search results. So a lot of people now, they're used to seeing like recipes, and they're used to seeing the reviews on inorganic search results. With the gold stars and stuff like that. So that's all, and there's thousands of different types of structured data. Very few of those Google uses to provide rich results, like the knowledge panel and stuff like that. So Huckabuy has had this really ingenious, I would say ingenious, but at the same time, it took a lot of development time to come up with a simple product, or it's a product, really. It's simple software that you install it on your website, and it finds those different signals and marks those up accordingly. So you don't need a developer or a really technical nerdy team to do that. You just install the software and it's done. Some of the case studies that Huckabuy's put out have just been incredible, because those rich results, they enhance the rich results. And then going back to like the Google search algorithm, interaction with those search results, because they've been enhanced, your click-through rate goes up. That's a major signal to Google that people love you. And so in turn, your rankings will go up, and you'll start being discovered for more keywords as well, because Google sees that you're more of a valuable site, or at least what the people want. I love, and this is one of my sayings, is Google really doesn't care about your website or your business. They care about what the people do with it, and they care about people. So when you do what the people want, that's when you start getting those rankings. So that structured data software is kind of what drew me into Huckabuy. And I've been with Huckabuy for 2 years now, and it's just like, if I want to reach out to these customers or potential customers and say, look, guys, you're missing out if you don't do this. It's like, well, you'll always get customers that in providing that value of, well, we can't afford it or something like that. And it's like, you can't not afford it, is what I really want to tell people. So, so moving past the structured data, obviously that kind of was that big jump for Huckabuy. And now
a little bit on the structured data product. Yeah. What's wild about it? So I think of structured data as like, there's kind of two main benefits. There's one, it just helps Google understand. Sites are not easy. Not all HTML is the same. There's lots of blockers that make it hard for Google to understand. So when you speak their language, they're just going to understand more. And the more they understand, usually the more keywords that you start ranking for. And that's where it's really powerful from a performance perspective, is you'll see these big jumps in ranking keywords, number of ranking keywords. The second benefit is what you mentioned before, which is rich enhancements or rich results through organic search pages and SERPs. That's just evolving and evolving, right? I mean, you're probably as knowledgeable as anyone on this to see how Google leverages structured data more and more. And it's not slowing down. If anything, it's picking up. There's a crazy statistic that 50% of searches are now 0-click. So they just get the answer.
Yep.
All powered by structured data. So it is a movement. And the other piece of it is, as voice search increases, voice search is also powered by structured data. So voice search is essentially reading back to the user what the first rich results is. And that gives them the ability to answer questions and satisfy users via voice search. So as far as what's funny too about our software is it's a bit of a bubblegum job in that it's kind of like Google's algorithm. Like there were real purists that back in the day when Google started getting going, and they would constantly be sort of tacking on these pieces, bolting on pieces to their algorithm. And it wasn't just like a pure algorithm. It was like very complicated. And it had, for this, all of a sudden we're going to tweak this a bit and penalize sites for bad links. And then we're going to tweak this a bit. And it really is like a hodgepodge. And I can't imagine how many lines of code it is now. Our structured data software is kind of similar to that. It's all about relevancy. And so you have to make a lot of tweaks and little adjustments for it to work. It's not a pure, algorithm. It is sort of a piece together, and that work by our engineering team over many years now is what makes it powerful. And just like Google's algorithm, it really is sort of bolted together, but at the end of the day, it works and it drives great structured data in an automated fashion for our customers. And they, as you mentioned, they get great results.
They do. It's funny when you say it's like trying to understand what Google, or trying to relay that language to Google or learn that language. It always makes me think of like a movie where someone's going to a place that they don't know the language, or someone's coming to them and then they just start yelling at them, thinking like that's going to help, raising the tone. So we're not just raising, we're not yelling at Google. We've taken the time to understand that language. So that being said, like with the structured data, that allowed, and it's going back to what you said as, you didn't really intend to be an SEO company, but that's where, hey, it came about. Let's talk a little bit about what did you come up with the idea for dynamic rendering? Was that just like a company powwow? Because that's something entirely different. And once again, for our audience, dynamic rendering, and our audience who hopefully are knowledgeable about SEO, is that Google and other search engines have these bots that go in and scan your website. And those bots have a limited time because there's billions of websites out there to scan your site. So going back to learning the language and providing that language to Google, what dynamic rendering is you serve a version of your website to the bot itself that doesn't look anything like what the user sees, but it allows that bot to crawl it and get more of an in-depth crawl based on the fact that you're giving it to them or giving it to the bot faster. If you want to touch on that too a little bit, go for it.
Well, let me just correct you just a little bit. It actually does a lot like the regular site, that users. And there's a cool tool. If you ever, I don't know if you've done this, Ryan, it's pretty neat. There's a cool it's like a user agent switcher, and it's a plugin in your browser, and you can actually change what user agent you want to view the page as. You can change it to a Google bot, you can change it to a Bing bot. And so you can go to a dynamically rendered Huckabuy customer and put that extension in and flip it to a Google bot and actually interact with the site just like Google does when they come and crawl.
Okay.
That's a really crazy concept. And it's a big break from Google because forever they said, we just crawl what the user sees, and we're not interested, no tricks and stuff like that. And then it really came about because of JavaScript. JavaScript's kind of their nemesis. JavaScript was powering more and more content on the internet. They can't crawl it with their traditional HTML crawler. They have to they put it to what's called a rendering queue, which is very similar technology to just your Chrome browser, where it renders the page, and then they come in with a different bot and they're able to index everything. But it takes like 10 times the computing capacity to do that than it does just to have an HTML bot. So if you look at like their expense structures and what they're spending on servers and computing time, it was really a problem. So that's really why they opened up this dynamic rendering. And no, it was not my idea.
Okay.
Chase Mathewson, our CTO, you know well, he came to me one day, like we had talked about, so we had something at Overstock that was not just for bots, but we called it the caching layer. And the caching layer was like pre-cached of our top, call it, 1 million pages every night. We would cache them with Akamai, and they'd be there and they'd be really fast. We realized very early how important page speed was, not just for SEO, but that it was very important for conversion rates. And so we just had a huge push for a couple of years to make the site as fast as possible. And the solution was architected and built was this we called it the caching layer. And it did its job. It was amazing. And I remember telling Chase about this, and he was like, well, that could be a really cool software product. And then he learned about, he studies Google, and his team, they're very, very thorough. They're very thoughtful. They read everything that comes out. They watch all the whenever a Google developer speaks, or they watch the videos when there's Google I/O, they tune in and they just really pay attention. And it was about 2 years ago, and it wasn't even written. They just heard about dynamic rendering from a Google engineer talking at Google I/O. And so he started looking into it, and I was just blown away. Like, he definitely discovered it for sure. He ultimately architected it. We talked about it, like what it could do, because it was such a big change. And we were pretty much, I think we were the first company to offer a dynamic rendering solution. And to be clear, we have the best structured data product in the world today, which is awesome.
Oh, by far, yeah.
We also have the best dynamic rendering product in the world. Sometimes we're more pricey than the competition that's come after us, but you're getting the best. And it's not so pricey that it doesn't pay for itself, that's for sure. Because with some of these things, you don't want to skimp, right? It's really important to get your structured data right. And if you look at the revenue impact with good structured data versus broken structured data, it's kind of a no-brainer. So that, I got to give all the credit to Chase. He's brilliant. His team's brilliant. And they delivered a dynamic rendering solution, which is not an easy task. If you think of like, okay, go into salesforce.com and make a copy of that site that's great for search bots and loads at like 100 milliseconds per page. Like, that's a difficult dev task.
That's a tough one, yeah.
Their first version was in 6 months. They were heads down. It was the hardest I've ever seen our engineering team sprint. And first to market, got a bunch of big customers on it, and it's an exciting product. It's cool to see the next evolution of it now coming in the form of a user version with our page speed product. But the dynamic rendering thing is, I think, for any SEO that's been around the business for a long time, when we heard about dynamic rendering, everybody was like, what? That's something you can do now? And it was such a big break that for months and months, even today, when we're on sales calls, people will be like, well, won't you get penalized for that? And won't you get in trouble? And it's like, no, here's like the page on Google that tells you to do this. So it's a real, I think, dynamic rendering personally, I think you've been in SEO maybe longer than me. I think I learned about it in like 2006 or 2007. And it's the biggest like single change they've made since I've been tracking them, other than maybe a couple like of the big bad link updates that crushed everybody. But I think from a sort of like what they're looking for perspective, if you're on the up and up and not doing any black hat stuff, it was the biggest change I've seen in whatever that is.
Yeah, and it's kind of funny because I'll go into Search Console and look at some of our customers after they've implemented dynamic rendering, and you can just see those crawl stats go nuts in the crawl report, especially Google's or Search Console's new crawl report too. So it's really for Huckabuy and to be able to figure that out within 6 months was there's not a lot of software teams out there. So I got to give props to the software team and the developers. They're awesome. Which kind of actually it's really neat to see Huckabuy coming up with these new products and not just saying, well, hey, we're just going to stick with structured data, or we're just going to stick with dynamic rendering. There's something new that is all the rage right now, and it's simply because of a little Google announcement that they had last year about a core update that's coming in May. You want to talk about page speed for a little bit?
Yeah, I think this is a big one. Google's never done this before, in that they'll be talking about an algorithm update for a year before it happens. That's just not normal for them. They usually never talk about updates before they happen. I don't even know if I remember them ever talking about an update before it happened. And this one,
I don't know either. It's one of those where it's like, okay, if it's a year in advance before that algorithm comes, then they're giving people time. Yeah, it's important.
And they also postponed it, which is also mind-blowing to me, that they decided to push it. I think it'll end up being about 6 months. It was supposed to happen right around now. So actually a little earlier in January, but they decided to push it because of COVID. And I think their philosophy was that they just didn't want to disrupt the economy, which it sounds like it's going to do. And there's a lot of slow websites out there, and that's the sites that are going to get hurt by this. So it's called the Google Page Experience Update. They've announced that it's coming in May. And it's all about page speed and not having front-end trickery that tries to trick users. Essentially, those are the two things that they care about. So the problems that they're trying to address are, there's a lot of slow sites, and they're not getting faster. If anything, they're getting slower. And so Google has a lot of weight, more weight than probably any company on the internet. And just like, they can get people to convert to Chrome browsers or use Gmail or whatever, like they shape how we use the internet. Like they shaped how we search, our search behavior, like how we actually go about searching for things, what we're comfortable, what queries we actually use, what browser we use, what email service we use. They're very good at that. And this is an example of them doing that again. So they're putting a stake in the ground and they're saying, we are done with slow websites. And so I think come May, if you have a slow site, no matter how big your brand is, you're going to take a pretty hefty penalty. And if you look across the internet, so that sort of the measurement stick today would be Google Lighthouse report, which is a score that's from 0 to 100. 100's fastest, 0's slowest. It's fed into Google through Chrome user data all around the world. So they're not just measuring it with bots. They're not measuring it with bots. They're measuring it with real users. And the average score today is 37. So 37 out of 100, which is a pretty slow site. And that's going to get penalized. So your average site is going to get hurt by this. Who knows? What I always say with algorithm updates, you always hear about the losers. You hear the sites that go down as a result, and they complain, and they're all over, Search Engine Journal, and they're talking about it and throwing a huge hissy fit. Keep in mind, with every link that goes down, some link has to go up. So the big thing with this is getting ahead of it. And we've built a product specifically for this algorithm update. It's a page speed product. And if you go to Huckabuy today and you try to test it using Google Lighthouse, you'll probably get us in the, we drink our own Kool-Aid. You'll probably see our site in the high 90s. So we'll definitely benefit. Can't wait for May. We'll benefit as a website, we'll benefit as a company, because people are going to be freaking out. And so we're trying to get ahead of that, right? We're doing a big marketing push. between now and May. We've written a ton of content. If you search for 2021 Google algorithm update, Huckabuy ranks #1, which is incredible. If you search for just Google algorithm update, I think we're in the top 10 now. We have a lot of content around it and what it means and what you have to be doing if you don't, regardless of whether you buy Huckabuy or not. So it's a big deal. I think it's a turning point for the internet. It is very similar to like when, these big trends like the movement to mobile and mobile's a big driver behind this, right? Because phones are slower and it's just experience. So they're kind of putting a stake in the ground. They've done it ahead of time, telling people a year in advance to get prepared. People are dragging their feet. Really smart SEO companies have been working on page speed for years now and are pretty well positioned. And Overstock, Amazon, and eBay, they're working on this. We have a product for it. So just like the page speed is a very difficult problem to solve. And just like dynamic rendering was, and we've spent the last 9 months of dev work on page speed exclusively. And the product works. Brian, you can talk to it. You work with more customers than I do. It's cool. It's really cool. It's a great way to jump to the front of the line. It lends itself to a SaaS solution because your average team, if you bring up as a marketer, hey, we got to work on page speed, good luck getting that prioritized with your dev team. If you even have dev resources. So this is a very simple way, and I'm happy to talk a little bit about why we're evolving into this more of like a content delivery page experience company than a pure SEO company. But it's definitely the future, and yeah, very excited about it. I think it's going to be a major update.
Yeah, and I think to touch on that too, if for the audience that's going to be watching this, is really Huckabuy's, I guess, strategy is to take all that super technical stuff that would cost tens to sometimes hundreds of thousands of dollars to change on your website if you were like as big as an Amazon or as big as an Overstock. This software, and obviously any software is not just going to be a turn on and you're good. There's obviously some configuration which our support team's there for, but just the amount of work that it takes away from those developers that have been scared of coding JSON LD in 50,000 50,000 pages.
You think of like your normal, right? You've sat in the marketing chair for a long time. Yep. How easy is it for you to get your SEO, your technical SEO project done? No matter how many dev resources you have, if you wanted to change, you want to implement, in-house really good structured data, how easy is that for you to get done? Or you wanted to increase page speed, or you want to change all your meta descriptions, or you wanted to change your top navigation and the way that the site and breadcrumbs, like all dev tasks that I know for 95% of people listening and 95% of marketers, they'll say they either don't have the resource, they do, and they say they're going to do it, but they'll never do it. And they just can't get it done. Dev resources are expensive. They are, they're usually not dedicated to SEO folks, unfortunately.
Yep.
So the real idea of Huckabuy is, one, watch Google like a hawk. If you give Google what they want, they reward you for it. So let's watch them and listen to them and really absorb what they're looking for out of a website. And two, let's provide a SaaS solution for those hard technical SEO problems that you can pay for and install and get, instead of having to constantly be battling internally and internal politics to try to get some of these things across the line. And so that's kind of what we're all about for now.
It's funny because I agree with you on that one. There's been so many companies that I've worked with, whether I'm on the marketing team or on the other side, like in the development or the engineering team. Those two departments never get along. Development's always like, well, why? And well, it's because we're doing SEO and it's going to get us more traffic. And they still don't seem to it's there's always that break. It's always like with companies that have salespeople in them, it's like, hey, we promised these guys this, and then the engineering or the support team, that they're like, oh geez, he had to, they bury their head in their hands. So it's really, really nice to see that Huckabuy is actually going there. So I don't want to take a ton of time, because what we're going to be doing is we're going to be breaking this video down into sections. So like the dynamic rendering or the page speed and the structured data, it's all going to be on its little sections, so it's easily digestible. But I guess my last question is, can you kind of give us a little insight onto where Huckabuy is headed? Is there anything on the horizon without giving out too much information?
Yeah, for sure. So a lot around the page experience, which is kind of a weird way to describe it, but think of it as like site delivery and how well, not just bots, but anybody, you work so hard. Think about all the money that a company puts into their website, and the content and the images and, whatever type of site it is, it's probably an asset, and that asset is very expensive. Think of us as making sure you're getting the most out of that asset. And that means, how well are you delivering that asset to your users? And how well are you delivering that asset to search engines? Another sneak peek is around the idea of auto onboarding. So developers, we're much more starting to target into developers that are looking for solutions to these problems. So come May, there's going to be a lot of development teams that are tasked with page speed and why are my rankings gone and this and that. We want to have a way that a developer could purchase Huckabuy or try Huckabuy without talking to a sales rep. They can just log in, get onboarded in themselves in, an hour, and be able to experience the benefits of Huckabuy. Right now, that's not the case. They have to, it's usually happening from marketing. They're having sales conversations. They're getting, getting a contract and blah, 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 blah. I think this solution is one that lends itself to engineers in particular, but also marketers saying, I want this. I don't want to go through the sales process. I want to give it a try, and I want to sign up and give it a go and kick the tires and see what it does, and give you feedback, Huckabuy, and tell you what we want and all those types of things. So those are kind of the two main things. We obviously have a lot of ideas, but we try to stay pretty focused on what we think the big wins are in terms of growth. But I think we want our brand and our company to be being used by more people, having people get more benefit from it, but we need to distribute, what we've built more easily. And I think that comes through, an auto onboarding and ability for people to just say, yep, I need this, I want this, I'll sign up here, I'll try my trial, I'll see how it goes. And if we, deliver, which we're very good at doing, and that's a great path towards growth.
Yeah, it's a true SaaS company when you can just go in, buy it, run it, and see how it works, and you're good to go.
Yeah, what's so exciting about that for me is the idea of, like, it becomes almost like an overstock transaction. Like, I spent my whole career dealing with people that I've never talked to or met. So that's like the business side that I'm pretty good at, is like driving traffic, driving people, and converting them and getting them going. And that's not been Huckabuy's model. So I'm very excited about that opportunity.
Awesome. Yeah, I have to say the same thing too. It's just seeing Huckabuy go in the direction of, you go to, if you want Photoshop, you go to Adobe's website, you buy a license and you download Photoshop and you're good to go. Same with, Microsoft Office or something like that. Seeing us get into that aspect of it is really, really exciting. And I think will open up the doors quite a bit to those people that just don't want to talk to a person. They just want to do it. So, okay. So go for it.
If that's okay.
What's that?
I have a question for you before we wrap up, if that's okay.
Of course.
So one cool thing for you and I that we've experienced together over the last 12 months is Huckabuy has been very focused on our own SEO, which is something that we didn't do at the beginning. But we focused a lot on it this year. And I believe we went through the numbers this week, actually. I think our domain authority jumped something like 35 points and our traffic 10x in 1 year, which is great.
It's almost unheard of.
It's really rare. And so what I'd ask of you is like, what you were a part of that, a big part of that. What were some of those things? Like what was it that drove that kind of growth? I mean, to 10x your traffic in 12 months and jump your domain authority by 35 points. I mean, it's unheard of. We look at our whole, we have tons of customers. We look, no one did that this year. I anticipate we're going to have another huge jump in 2021. What was that? What was the key to that kind of crazy growth, Brian? And you probably haven't seen it before, and you were a big part of it. So I think people would love to hear it.
Yeah. It's funny because I remember being tasked with, it's like, hey, and Ryan, you and Finn are in charge of this. And I'm like, oh, okay, here we go. Those of you who don't know Finn, he's what's his title now? He's a marketing manager. Yeah. So we had so many phone calls on.
Really 3 folks that have worked very hard on this. It's Finn, Ryan, and Lindsay. And the 2 of them, and that's not a big SEO team or marketing team. And God, has it been a success story? So yeah, sorry to interrupt.
No, you're fine. You're totally fine. So shout out to obviously Finn and Lindsay and our website designers as well. But at the same time, it was, we noticed that at some point, Huckabuy was just a basic WordPress site. That's all it was. It was thrown together. There were updates that were made. And so I kind of had a feather in my cap of I think I pushed Finn into that thirst for SEO knowledge because he started asking me questions. It's like, you kind of have to get the right mindset around it, where there's so many aspects. I mean, there's the content on the website, there's the internal link structure. At this point, there's 200, almost 300 ranking factors for a website. So what we did was we kind of broke those down into sections. And then Finn just took off with it, from the podcast and starting to getting traffic to where I looked at the site and I'm like, hey, we need to, like you said before, we need to drink our own Kool-Aid. It's like, we need to get structured data on here. We need to be doing dynamic rendering. We need to be doing page speed. And to really see the jump where it happened was, I think, with the structured data. Finn wrote the content for it, and then I coded it so that our software could pick it up and implement it. And we started seeing these results. We started seeing FAQs and search results, and it was huge. And then I don't remember why, but I started getting into video recording. I think someone said something like, you have a great voice or something like that. I'm like, okay, good. I have a face for radio. So I started doing these recordings. And then, so especially with like the 2021 algorithm update page that we have that Geoff mentioned earlier, doesn't just rank number 1, it's 0. So if you ask Google, Google 2021 algorithm update, it's going to read that back to you. And that's from Huckabuy. And so we had hit the front page with that, but we were hovering kind of down at the bottom. And so someone said I should do a video. I did a video, and my goodness, it just shot to number 1 within a couple of days. And which kind of proved a couple of things. It's, first of all, video content. I think Google looks at that and says, okay, well, if someone doesn't want to read this, they can listen to it. And it's more the user experience that they're into. And then second, anything if anything that's said in the video is actually transcribed by Google. Or you can upload your own transcription, and then having those two linked, I mean, that's just more crawlable content. So I think linking those together was the final push of us hitting not just the front page, but the top of the front page. And obviously, you know, we're getting backlinks. And I think one of the other biggest things was the podcasts and getting those done. Geoff, you've done an incredible job on those podcasts. I know some of them were a little bit awkward for you with the questioning and stuff like that. It's always fun to see those.
Podcast, right? I mean, we found a really scalable backlink strategy.
Yep.
And I almost don't even want to give this out because it's such a good tip. Like, we identified podcasts that had great domain authority for me to go on, and any podcast that you go on, you're going to get whatever links back to our site that we want.
Yep.
And that was Finn figuring out the backlink strategy and podcasts. And there were two factors. It was not just that we were getting backlinks, it was that we were getting leads and customers from me going on podcasts. So it was a very clever marketing move that I never thought of. Like, it was way beyond, like, I'm like, all right, I'll go on a podcast, whatever. And he really figured that out. Your video content, I think, was huge. Lindsay's writing and using that Surf SEO, is that right? I want to shout out to the
SEO Surfer, yeah.
SEO Surfer to analyze pages and what needs to be on them. And also, our team has been very just heads down. You know, SEO is not, it doesn't just happen. They worked their butts off, yourself included, this year, developing content, going on podcasts, recording videos, getting backlinks, all the things. And that actually happened not just this year, but it happened the year before that to sort of set the groundwork. And yeah, really cool recipe for success that you were a big part of. And I'm appreciative of.
Well, and thank you for that. One note on that one: don't ever try and buy backlinks again, because we screwed that one up big time.
Oh yeah, well, not as big as I screwed it up with Overstock, and that's a story for another day.
All right.
In for 6 months, but
hey, there's another video for us.
Yeah, exactly.
It'll be story time with Ryan and Geoff. How about that?
Well, thank you, Ryan, for doing this. It's been a pleasure, and let's do it again soon.
Sounds good. Thank you, Geoff. And yeah, if anybody has any questions or anything, visit huckabuy.com, check us out, and we'll go from there. Yeah. All right.
All right. Thanks, Ryan.
You bet. Thank you.